Breaking news this evening. Reportedly, Blake Griffin has been traded to the Detroit Pistons. The Clippers' second all-time leading scorer, also leading LA in assists this season. Bryce Johnson, Willie Reed also headed to the Motor City from La La Land. And the Pistons send back Avery Bradley, Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, as well as a first-round and second-round draft pick. So much to unpack here this evening for you. Welcome to NBA Game Time, and what a start it's been to a busy evening. Isaiah Thomas, Sam Mitchell, Chris Miles here with you on this Fast Break Monday. We keep things moving. But before we get started, we'd like to take the time to welcome back Isaiah. Our condolences go out to you and your family on the loss of your brother. You know you're a brother to us, and it's great to have you here with us, and we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you. And the Turner family has been great, so thank all of you for, you know, all of your condolences, your well wishes, and the fans and everyone who was kind enough to my brother and my family during this tough time. Thank you. And that's back to work.
It is indeed. And we're talking about your old team this evening. The Pistons were buyers as we approach this trade deadline.
But doesn't he look like, with that outfit on, with the vest and the pinstripes and the gold tie, you look like you could be a Motor City guy. Isaiah, you've been working on this guy, haven't you?
Oh, most definitely. You know,
you look like you could be a Motor City guy.
You came ready to play.
Absolutely. Put me in the game, coach.
You would be male fast superstar right now.
Well, let's bring in a guy breaking the news this evening, David Aldridge, to help us understand the moving pieces here. Blake Griffin headed to Detroit. He's missed 99 games in the last 4 seasons and is due $171 million over the next 5 years. DA, should the Pistons have some trepidation about making this deal?
Well, yeah, look, it's a gamble. It's a gamble for Detroit in that sense. He has had an injury history that's been pretty extensive, and Blake's one of those guys, and there's 2 groups of guys in the NBA. There's guys that get hurt and they're out for a couple games, and then there's guys who get hurt and they're out for a couple months. And unfortunately, Blake has been in that latter category throughout his career. So it's a gamble for the Pistons. But look, Detroit was not getting it. It wasn't getting done with the roster that they had put together. They were out of the playoff race as of right now. People were not coming to that new building to see this team in downtown Detroit. And that has to be a consideration for a team that put a lot of resources into helping get that building built. You got to start seeing some return on that. And Blake Griffin is still, I would say, I think arguably one of the top dozen or so most popular players in the league, if you look at it from an endorsement standpoint and also from his abilities on the floor. I mean, this is a guy that still is a highlight reel guy when he's healthy. And so from Detroit's standpoint, it's a gamble, but it's a reasonable gamble because where were they going exactly? They were not in the Eastern Conference. They were not a playoff team. And so they put a lot of money into Andre Drummond. They put a lot of money into Reggie Jackson, and it wasn't getting done for Stan Van Gundy. So they had to do something to try and shake this thing up, and they did shake it.
DA, when you look at this deal, you know, from a cap perspective, and also what it does for the Clippers, you know, the Pistons are pretty locked up. But if you look at it from the other side, what does it do for the LA Clippers?
Well, Zeke, look, here's the thing with them. They won't be in a position for a max offer this summer, but in 2019, a year from now, they probably will be in a position to be able to go after, you know, a big-time free agent player. And that was important to them going forward. They also saw their team, while they were overachieving, as they put it, doing everything they could, playing with a lot of guys on 2-way contracts, G League guys who were really helping them. That was not sustainable over 82 games. And they realized that. And as much as they like Blake Griffin, and he's been the face of their franchise really throughout since he was the number 1 pick for them in 2009, they were also not in the playoffs right now. Now, they're closer than Detroit is, but they aren't in the playoffs right now. And they just felt like, to your point, going forward, having flexibility while still trying to keep a competitive team out there. That's why you bring in Tobias Harris. That's why you bring in Avery Bradley. And now maybe you're able to get either Lou Williams, who's been playing probably their best player this year, or DeAndre Jordan signed to a long-term extension. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that either one of those guys can't get traded tomorrow, but at least right now you have the opportunity or the potential to re-sign one of those guys, whereas you probably didn't before.
DA, when I sit here and look at this deal, I agree with you. The Pistons had nothing to lose. They wasn't going to be a playoff team right now in the East, and they bring in a star player in that building. But my question is, one, it's a two-part question. One, what are they going to put around Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan? And two, from the Clippers standpoint, you're talking about DeAndre Jordan and you're talking about Lou Williams. Are those two guys going to be traded, or are they going to try to re-sign those guys?
Well, look, my guess, Sam, is that it's more likely that they would move at least one of those guys than re-sign both of those guys. Because to your point, I mean, there's no point in putting money into guys when you've just made the big move to clear cap space for 2019, right? So you're not going to probably sign DeAndre Jordan to a long-term deal that's going to eat up a lot of that cap space. So my guess is that it's probably more likely that one of those guys gets moved, maybe even both. But they do want to have a competitive team the rest of the season, and I think you're going to have one of those guys on the roster if you're going to have any chance of doing that. So I don't think they will necessarily move them both, but I could see one of them going, definitely. And look, they were, they had gone about as far as they could go with this franchise in terms of championship contending. Once they decided to move on from Chris Paul, and Chris Paul decided to move on from them, whichever version you think is more accurate. They put a lot of money into Blake Griffin, but then he got hurt again at the start of this season, and I think that really sent some shockwaves throughout that organization. But make no mistake, guys, I've talked to a bunch of people. They are as down an organization right now as you could possibly be, because no matter what you think of Blake Griffin and all the kind of sometimes strange stuff that happens around him, he's an all-star player. He's a 5-time all-star. He's a guy that is, when he's healthy, as good as anybody in terms of the front court. And he was a star in a town that only responds to stars. He was a star.
So the Pistons had lost 8 straight games. Stan Van Gundy, do you think he was on the hot seat at this moment and had to make this move to keep the Pistons relevant in the East because they went from second to out of the playoff picture?
No question. There's no question. He was, there's a lot of pressure on Stan and all of the people in Detroit, because they, when Stan came in there, he got carte blanche. I mean, he remade that franchise. And so he brought in Tobias Harris, and he gave Andre Drummond that big extension, and they acquired Reggie Jackson from Oklahoma City and gave him $80 million. They brought in Avery Bradley this summer. So these are all, Stan Van Gundy moves to try and make this team better. And to your point, they got off to a great start, and then ever since then it's been flatlined, and now they've really taken a turn. There's no doubt there's enormous pressure on Stan Van Gundy to turn that thing around as quickly as possible. And again, is it a gamble? Yes, but you can understand that franchise from where they are right now, really going nowhere within a new building, especially needing to reset and needing to bring in somebody that people might. And Zeke knows this better than anybody. It gets cold in Detroit in the wintertime. You need a reason to put your coat on and go see somebody play some basketball and come out your pocket to pay to see somebody play basketball. Well, Blake Griffin is that type of player when he's healthy.
David Aldridge, we appreciate your time. Hey, every time I see you, we're going to do this thing, okay? One DeMatha. How about that?
There you go. I love it. I love it. Tell them about it now.
Well-educated man. That is your alma mater. Appreciate it, my friend.